Part 1. Into the Forest. Chapter 9. Catri despairs. By the time we arrived home, it was dark. The senior guard of the small group the Earl had dispatched with us helped me down off the wagon. The others stationed themselves outside our door and around our small property. I hated to admit it, but I was glad for their presence. Glad for the ride home in their cart. Glad we didn't have to traverse the darkness ourselves. Glad my plan had worked. For the moment. Bragged all the way home. But I got the feeling it was more to cover the feeling of tenuous safety he must have felt as keenly as I did. Our fragile safety was balanced by our precarious position. I just hoped the guards didn't slit our throats in the night or burn us to death in our cottage. I had the Earl's word, and I had the suspicion that he wanted to keep an eye on me for a while to see if I was conjuring magic, and to see how much the rose magic worked on Catri, and whether there were any ill effects. But when he was done with us, would he keep his bargain then? The senior guard walked me to the front door. I hesitated and looked to Ree for help. How were we to get in? He'd already disappeared. The guard looked at me like I should let us in. I told my sister to barricade herself in while I was gone. Give her a moment to realize we're here and let us in. I rapped gently on the door. Catri? Catri, it's me. If she obeyed our instructions, she wouldn't let us in. But the door swung open. Ree stood inside the cottage, grinning as he let us in. Catri sat at the table, slumped in misery. The guard took in the scene. I was sure he thought it was more magic. Maybe black magic. He couldn't see that Ree held the door open. As for magic, I'd been pondering that opportune ember the entire ride home. I was sure there was some kind of magic behind it. But it wasn't mine. I had none. So whose was it? Who else was watching us? Catri. I hastened to the table and put my hands on her shoulders. Catri, the Earl has been kind enough to offer us protection for a few days. This is one of his guards. Catri looked up at me dully. She still looked the same as when I'd left her. No change in the long hours we'd been gone. The guard strode to the table and took a closer look at Catri in the candlelight. He had orders to report what he found back to the Earl. He'd probably send a messenger back as soon as he went outside. How old is she? He caught Catri's chin and roughly turned her face from side to side, viewing her from all angles. 17. I stroked her hair, glad she didn't fight him. She looks like she could be your grandma. He sounded disbelieving, and there was a vicious scoff in his voice. I stiffened. She has the aging illness. I let my tone plead for a little kindness. I brushed the top of her head with a kiss. Don't worry, Catri. You look much better than you did before the rose. The soldier dropped his hand from her chin and scrutinized the cottage. If you're looking for a flying broomstick, you can relax. I glared at him. We only have the regular floor-sweeping kind here. No potions or toadstools either. I hoped he was embarrassed for being so obvious. I stared him down. He leaned into me. You should be glad your sister hasn't turned into a beauty. Was he trying to be kind? He hustled out the door. It slammed shut behind him. I was relieved he was gone, but Catri barely seemed to notice. I need more magic, Maze. Catri looked at me with pleading eyes. The rose gave you all it had. I pulled up a chair next to her and took her hands in mine. We have to count our blessings. You may not be young again, but you're beautiful to me. And for the moment, you're no threat to the Earl. Be patient, Cat. The magic may work yet. Her gaze went to the door. Are we prisoners in our own home now? Of course not. We're under the Earl's protection. I squeezed her hands, but I didn't believe my own words. For how long? She looked tortured. Just until the king's party has chosen his next bride. Until the happy party has left. Word is that the king's emissary is almost here. A fortnight from now all will be back to normal. So we're not to get a chance at being selectress? I was so surprised by her question and the sound of disappointment in her voice that I dropped her hands. No. Does it matter? We have no chance anyway. We're safer this way. Everyone knows our selectress will be going to her death. It's only a matter of time. She can only hope the king will be merciful in his selection of execution methods. I didn't mean to sound so harsh, but I was hoping to snap Catri out of the dangerous idea that being our selectress would lead to any kind of happily ever after. This king wasn't going to fall in love with his new fiancée, not one of our kind. Our selectress would never be queen. I wouldn't say Catri was naive, exactly, but she'd always been too much of a dreamer. But our selectress could do so much good. She sounded wistful, but I wasn't believing her altruistic act. I raised an eyebrow. True. But? She'll have the best doctors available, the very best. If she ever gets sick, you'd need a different king for that, Cat. Put it out of your mind. I was bone weary. I got up and went to the upholstered chair in front of the fire. Ree left me alone and let me sit. I should have been hungry too, but I'd lost all appetite to dreams of sleep. Ree curled up on a cushion at my feet. We have much to talk about. I have stories to tell you from my wanderings in the castle. Yes. Yes. But sleep waved before my eyes. The shadows had left the edge of my weariness. Sleep was more enticing than the fear of it was a deterrent. Ree was suddenly on the alert. He sat up tall. Look me in the eye. I was too tired to fight him. I met his eye. He studied me, then nodded to himself. The light is coming back to your eyes. Talk can wait. I think it's safe to sleep now. I hoped he was right. In any case, I couldn't fight sleep any longer. My head bobbed. I didn't wake until sunrise, and even then I fought it. Someone had thrown a blanket over me and banked the fire. I was still fully dressed and a little stiff, but I finally felt like I could think again. I'd slept in the chair many nights while Mother was ill and dying. It was surprisingly comfortable. I looked around, but no Catri. Her bedroom door was closed. She must have covered me and gone to bed. Ree appeared at my feet, looking as dapper as ever and fully rested. He never seemed to need much sleep. At last she wakes. How are you, Sorella? Get your beauty sleep? As tired as I was, I think that would take 1,000,000 years or more. I took another quick look around. It appears we're all still safe and sound. Ree nodded. And imprisoned in our own home. Or you are anyway. Nothing can stop me from going where I want. He swaggered around the cushion at my feet comically. He tapped his chest. While you slept, I went out on another intelligence-gathering mission. There's much to tell you. It would be best to have our little briefing before your sister wakes. I rubbed my eyes, but I was perking up. Yes. He was right, of course. And I want to hear what you found out at the castle. I yawned and stretched. I really am eager. If I hadn't been exhausted to death last night. Ree waved my apologies aside. Think nothing of it. A mortal's constitution is weak. The human body can only take so much before it must rest. But I need very little. I have a strong constitution. Thank goodness, I said, playing to his vanity. I couldn't say much in the cart on the way home, but you really were brilliant in the Earl's office. I would have liked to see him hit in the head with his own reading material. Truly I would have. I chuckled at the thought. Ree looked pleased. What can I say? Sometimes the mischief of the Municelli blends very well with your silly brownie code. Let's hope that happens even more often in the future, I said. I stretched again and my stomach growled. It was a good sign that my hunger was returning. I'd been so tired last night that I hadn't even put my dagger away or taken my gloves off. Part of me had been afraid to, certainly while the guards could see my hands. I pulled them off now and studied my hands, half hoping that the magic had worn off. But the left hand was just as beautiful as it had been yesterday. Maybe it was more than an illusion. Maybe it was really perfected and permanent. However, my right wrist had a 6-fingered bruise across it. Ree scowled. "You were brave in there, Maisie. The bruises will fade." I wiggled my fingers and stretched my hands. My left hand moved marvelously well and gracefully. "Look at this, Ree. My left hand moves so well, I might even become left-handed." "Not if you know what's good for you." He plopped cross-legged onto the cushion. Being left-handed was a sign of consorting with the darkness. It was pure superstition, but you couldn't talk people out of the belief. It would be even worse for me, since I'd held the rose with my left hand. People would say I'd soaked up dark magic. Still, the way my hand moved was lovely. It was too bad I didn't have a harp. I bet I could play it with my left hand, even without training. That was how agile my hand felt. I tucked my hands in my lap. The Earl's castle. What had everyone so upset? Did you manage to find out? Quickly. It was all anyone could talk about. The prince was called back to the palace. He won't be part of the selection party. The Earl is naturally disappointed and furious. He spent a great deal of coin thinking he would be entertaining a king, then a prince, and now he'll get nothing more than a high-ranking noble official who he could have entertained on a far smaller budget. And he'll have no chance to bend a prince's ear and win favor with court. Is there a problem then? An emergency in the kingdom? A prickle of fear shot down my spine. From what I gathered, there's no reason to worry. The king is notoriously known for changing his mind and orders. Capricious, they say. And heavily reliant on his brother. Twins and their connection. The king wanted his brother back in the capital, for some reason known only to himself. The prince was already partway through the Doove before the rider reached him. Word is that he wasn't happy about backtracking. My thoughts had gone in another direction. That settled it. The young man in the Doove couldn't have been the prince. If the prince had been abducted, it would be all anyone could talk about. There was nothing about the king's party being attacked by the feared Dorka. Nothing about one of his men gone missing and abducted? I asked. I heard no mention, no gossip of the sort. I frowned. Puzzled. Ree jumped to his feet. But there is good news. We won't be under house arrest for long. The king's party arrived at the castle late last night. The search for a new selectress begins today. Good, I said. Let's keep that piece of news from Catri for the time being. There's no point in making her more miserable. Even if she's become as beautiful as my hand overnight, she won't be allowed to vie for the king's hand. I sighed, fearing she'd wake from her sleep a true beauty. Or a monster. Hoping she'd be simply herself as I'd last seen her. Both beauty and monster were dangerous options right now. Either would lead to her imprisonment and possible death. Reread my thoughts. Should I check in on her? Before I could answer, the door to the bedroom swung open. Catri stood in the doorway, except for the expression of utter despair and resignation, looking like she had when I dozed off last night. The dark streak in her hair hadn't grown. The rest was still gray. Her face remained as lined. You're up. I tried to cover my relief that she was no worse by putting too much sunshine into my voice. How do you feel this morning? Did you sleep well? The same, Maisie. I slept well, but I feel and look the same as last night. This is all the magic I'm to expect. I hate that darkling. I hate him. If I ever run into him, you'll wisely run in the opposite direction. I forced a smile. Running wouldn't be enough. She'd need a hero like mine. While Catri crossed into the kitchen, I whispered to Ree and handed him my dagger. Return this from where I got it. Then go to town and the castle and be my eyes and ears.